All right, folks, so breaking news. We are back here once again from Carolina Beach on vacation, but the grind never stops because the UFC just sold its TV rights for $7.7 billion to Paramount, and we have to break it all down for one reason amongst many that we're going to get into in this video, but the biggest being, ladies and gentlemen, pay-per-view in MMA is dead. What do I mean? The breakdown, let's go. All right, so as I woke up about to go to the beach today, the news hit across every major wavelength in combat sports media. The UFC's rights deal has been announced, and boy, it is a big one. $7.7 billion to the winning bidder, and it's oddly enough one that I never saw coming. Not that I had inside information, but even people with inside information did not see this coming. The UFC is partnering and selling their TV rights to Paramount. Now, for people that are not in the United States, Paramount is essentially a major player in the U.S. nationally televised market. Now, we're not talking about just cable, like you've seen in years past with ESPN or Fox Sports or any of that stuff. Now, granted, they had their own national providers like ABC and Fox's actual channel. We're talking Paramount, which in other words is CBS, a national televised channel in pretty much every home in America, whether you have cable, subscription, whatever, that channel is in your household. Now, a couple of things about this deal is that all events are going to be a part of this package. It isn't just some sort of UFC fight night package and then you still have your pay-per-views. Pay-per-views are gone. You are going to get to watch UFC numbered events, meaning when the deal starts, events like UFC 319, 320. I'm not saying those events specifically, but the numbered events, the big pay-per-views, the big end-of-the-year card, International Fight Week, start of the year, those kind of Conor McGregor level cards, you're going to get to see those apparently on Paramount. And apparently, according to Ariel Helwani and even Dana himself today talking on various shows, at least 4 of those events, I don't know how many they're going to run per year now, but at least 4 are going to be on CBS, nationally televised. That's insane. So yeah, pay-per-view is gone. And, you know, I have a smile on my face, but it's a bit of a nuanced situation. Number one, yeah, it's great for fans. I saw some number like UFC fans were paying $1,061 a year are now going to be paying like $120 a year. Right now, I think as it sits, Paramount Plus is either $5.99 or $7.99, which gets you pretty much all access to all Paramount properties. And for fans, that's a massive win. Think about what combat sports specifically, because they're pretty much the only sport left in the pay-per-view business, what they've struggled with for years. And that is pay-per-view sales. That is paywalls. That is illegal streaming, trying to get fans to pay $80, $50, whatever, $25 to watch a pay-per-view level card already behind a paywall. When it was at ESPN, you had ESPN Plus, and then an $80 pay-per-view behind that. Now looks like it's going to be behind, again, the Paramount Plus paywall for most events. And then if you just want to watch the major cards, apparently those are going to be on CBS. That's, again, this is huge, huge for fans, because in an ever-changing market, pretty much every sport is going away from pay-per-view, even though it's kind of odd the way it works now because companies are banding streaming services together to almost make a new version of cable TV. It's very odd. I just saw an announcement with ESPN and Fox working on their direct-to-customer provider being a collaboration. I'm like, this is just cable, right? So we'll see what happens with that. But this specifically, Paramount, the UFC, apparently the way this thing went was they were only going to pick up a certain amount of events for the UFC. I don't know if that was Dana White Contender Series. I don't know if that was The Ultimate Fighter. They were only going to sparse out a couple of things for the UFC, which I thought was going to be the play here. I thought the UFC was going to go, okay, Netflix, take our pay-per-view events. Instead of being pay-per-view, now they're on Netflix. Dana White Contender Series over here. ESPN gets the fight. You know what I'm saying? I thought there was going to be like 4 or 5 different places like you see with the WWE right now, right? You have SmackDown on a different place than NXT, and a different place than Monday Night Raw, and a different place than the WWE premium live events. They're all over. They're not in one spot. The UFC said, we don't want to make you fans pay for this subscription, for that subscription, for this subscription. And I have to applaud it, because that's one of the big gripes of all MMA fans is we got to pay for this and that and this. They just said you're going to get it in one place, at least here in the United States. I assume, you know, my UK people, you guys are still going to have TNT Sports or however you watch the UFC now. But for fans here in the US, this is a massive, massive move. And I keep saying for fans, because it, and it was an entertainment product, it is a massive move. And for us to be able to enjoy the sport of MMA like we enjoy here in America, the NFL, which is predominantly on CBS or Fox, the NBA, which is predominantly on ESPN, ABC, or your local NBA Game Time, baseball, which is on Fox or ESPN, or just, you don't see a lot of MMA, and for that matter, boxing on big time national broadcast television anymore, not here in the US. So this feels like it's a step up in legitimacy, honestly, for the sport of MMA, because you feel like you're kind of playing where the big boys are now, right? Look at the adjective, play. Sorry, Kevin Nash reference. This feels like a major sports move. And again, you got to give credit to the people over at TKO. Sure, they're going to line their pockets with this. $7.7 billion is an insane amount of money for a TV rights deal. Just to give you guys reference, I got a couple stats for you. Does everybody remember when the UFC sold in 2016 to what now would become TKO? They sold their entire company for $4 billion. Not the rights, not the archives, the entire fucking company. And almost a decade later, just their TV rights have sold for just over a 7-year period, $7.7 billion. Just for 1 year of being on Paramount Plus, the UFC is raking in a fourth of what they sold the entire company for just 9 years ago. Also, I talked about other sports comparisons. The NBA, that's right, the National Basketball Association, one of the most profitable leagues in the US, their media rights deal is $24 billion over 9 years. It comes out to about $2.6 billion per year. The UFC is at 40% of that while not doing you're talking about the NBA runs over 1,000 games a year. The UFC, as it was announced today, they're going to do 43 events per year. 43 events for $1.1 billion per year. That right there is a steal, son. It just feels like MMA has become like, it's taken that next step, right? When they got to Fox, it felt that way. When they got to ESPN, it felt that way. And now they're on CBS, Paramount Plus, but CBS. And you hear Dana, I'll run the clip talking to Pat McAfee and others about the potential for this big White House lawn card they're talking about doing next year, potentially being on CBS. Think of the millions and millions of people that are going to watch that event. Take a listen.
July 4th, 250th birthday of the United States of America, live on CBS from the White House.
And now I know we still have some cynical UFC fans that are saying, well, we'll get the 4 big events, the 4 big ones that Dana's talking about, and everything else will be crap because they don't have incentivization to do big time cards anymore because pay-per-view's gone. And to that I say, you guys just hate everything, because not only does this give you more incentivization to build a star because you're not having to try to create one behind an $80 pay-per-view wall before they even become a star. Like, think about the way the UFC is trying to build stars now. There's a reason you're not seeing the Brock Lesnar's and the Ronda Rousey's and the Conor McGregor's and even the Chuck Liddells and GSP's. You're not seeing them because, one, you're in an era of pay-per-view where you're trying to build the star on undercards of people that aren't stars. So you're building under a card that not as many people are seeing as it is. And granted, there's a lot more that goes into it, fighter personality, promotion, etc. But now, in front of a national televised audience, whoever is on these undercards is going to get seen by so many more eyes, so many more opportunities to build stars. And honestly, that right there is a talking point that I turn around and I look at the boxing game right now and saying, are you watching this? Because this is why the UFC keeps growing and why boxing, especially without Big HE Turkey Al-Sheikh, is kind of spinning around in a circle. Because what the UFC is doing is what boxing has failed to do for 2 decades now, which is get their shit together and find a way on one specific platform, or to find a way on one specific platform without pay-per-view, without every single promoter being at every walks and ends of the earth. So you have to find this subscription or go over here, or here's Boxer and here's DAZN and here's this and here's that. That plus the different sanctioning bodies in boxing is a real problem for why we're not seeing that breakout major star. I mean, again, also comes down to personality and everything else. But my point being, there's a reason that TKO got into boxing. And yes, the Ali Act will be something that we have to talk about as it continues to develop and how that's going to work with fighters' rights and everything else. But they got into boxing because boxing shot itself in the foot over and over and over. And Turkey Al-Sheikh got into boxing for the same reason, because there wasn't this natural excitement about the sport. It wasn't growing. The sport was maintaining, not growing. And I'm telling you, if you're looking across the aisle and seeing what the UFC is doing, I think they're going to do the same thing in boxing, and it's going to take over the sport. Again, TKO builds relationships with these companies, builds relationship with these partners, these TV rights holders. You're going to see the same type of thing go on in boxing, and I don't think these other promoters are ready for it. I really don't, and I only think they have themselves to blame because you had years and years to figure this out, and you didn't do it. And now the UFC is kind of showing people how it's done. Turkey has gotten in business with Dana White for this specific reason, with TKO for this specific reason. You're going to see it on Netflix in about 4 weeks. They're going to run a huge event with Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. I got more videos coming out on that as we get closer, but not to get away from the point, I guess I just wanted to show you guys the UFC is miles ahead of boxing in this way. Miles ahead. And it's going to keep their sport growing, where boxing's tried to maintain and just, we have our 2 or 3 or 4 big stars, and outside of that, pay-per-view has been dead on that side for years as well. It's just no one wants to admit it, except Turkey. I mean, honestly, Turkey's the one trying to pull back the curtain on pay-per-view and say, hey, listen, no more pay-per-views when we do ring events. Here we go. But this is just a monumental announcement, and one that I think is going to change everything when it comes to combat sports. And also, this comes off the heels of another big announcement in the UFC that does have to do with this. You know, you have these pay-per-view gone, you have the UFC numbered events going to be, you know, easily accessible, and then you have the big 4 events that Dana wants to do potentially on CBS, again, national syndicated television. And, you know, people are kind of throwing the jokes about, oh, the UFC's gonna do 4 big events and the rest are gonna be in the Apex. Well, normally I'd be like, yeah, that's bullshit. But also, that's not happening, number one. We're not going to have 40 straight events in the Apex. But the ones that are in the Apex events are getting expanded. It's like every complaint an MMA fan would have is getting just slashed as I keep breaking down this announcement. It went from, you know, no fans at the Apex, and people don't like that, and for good reason. It's not a great watching experience for the average fan to hear someone get flatline KO'd and just crickets after. There's no energy. The fighters don't feel it either, right? It's just not a great place to hold fights because it feels like sparring almost. It doesn't even feel like an actual big-time event. You're going to see 5,000 to 10,000 people in these arenas, wherever, if it's going to be a build onto the Apex or if they're going to put more seats in or however they're going to do it. They're actually going to have fans, and these things are going to be centralized in Vegas, I assume, still, but that's a massive win as well. So even when you don't have the big, massive stadiums, you still get that big fight feel from a 5,000 to 10,000 fan base perspective. Now, the only real underlying thing that hasn't been addressed just yet, and I think some fighters, I saw Tom Aspinall was on Ariel's show today asking about it. The question now is, you move away from the pay-per-view model, and you keep hearing me talk about a big W for the UFC, big W for the fans, big W for the sport. Everybody seems to be legitimized more. Things are growing, going in a great direction. Fans' questions, concerns, all that are being answered in real time. But what about the big elephant in the room, which is fighter pay? If pay-per-view points are taken away from champions, which is kind of their big incentive once they get the belt, to sell pay-per-views, guys like Tom Aspinall and Magomed Ankalaev, Dricus du Plessis, who's fighting on pay-per-view this weekend, Jack Della Maddalena, Ilia Topuria, who's probably the biggest star in the UFC right now, and so on and so forth. What happens to that extra bonus they get for pay-per-view points if pay-per-view is no longer there? What's the big difference now in pay for a champion, and how is that going to be addressed? I mean, for one, yeah, the fighter split has never been great in the UFC. I think it's somewhere around, 18% of the revenue share goes to fighters. Even when that number soars to $7.7 billion over 7 years, and even when the UFC is probably going to be raking it in hand over fist at the gate still, meaning their ticket sales are still going to be massive. Now they're introducing new ticket sales, I assume, to be a part of the Apex events and be in that crowd. All that stuff, you still want to know, okay, that's great. Revenue is going up, but is the share percentage going up for fighters? I haven't heard anything like that. And even Tom Aspinall, he really had no idea, right? Because it's all coming out in real time. So instead of pay-per-view points, are we going to get streaming points? Or, is it going to be one of those things like a music industry change where music went from record sales to streaming numbers? Is that how it's going to be now with, bonuses for champions or whatever it is that is going to replace pay-per-view points? I don't know. I really don't. And I know that's a big concern for people, and it should be, right? Because selfishly as fans, of course, we want the best, most affordable option for us, the people paying to watch these fighters fight. But just like if I said the sport was going to grow to be recognized in the same space as the NFL and the NBA and the MLB, NHL, if the UFC is going to treat their fans that way, there should treat their fighters that way as well. Not to say that every fighter should walk in there and be on a $10 million I don't know, I'm exaggerating, but you get what I mean. There does need to be some sort of compensation relief for the pay-per-view points going away. And I don't really know how much the pay-per-view points in today's era were as massive as they were in like 2016 with Conor doing crazy numbers. Like if you were on a Conor McGregor card, your numbers were going up instantly, and Conor was making money hand over fist. Or even a guy like GSP or Brock Lesnar, who they all made pretty decent pay-per-view points. I don't know if we've seen pay-per-views to that level in years. So I don't know how much of a difference it would really even make. But regardless, there does need to be something in place, and that needs to be a topic of conversation when we're talking about it, because it is a really good thing. Like, seeing this happen is a massive win for MMA fans, for MMA media, for the sport itself. But at the end of the day, the fighters fight. And this also needs to be a win for them. This also needs to be, yes, you're going to get more exposure. Yes, you're going to get more eyeballs on the product, but they need to have more money in their pockets based on this. Because ultimately, yes, Dana, TKO, Mark Shapiro, Hunter, all those guys, the big wigs, they're the ones that are going out and getting these deals done and negotiating and all of that. So sure, reward them handsomely, but these fighters, unless they're stepping in the cage and providing highlight after highlight, guys like Ilia Topuria, guys like Alex Pereira, guys like Tom Aspinall, guys that are changing the sport, changing the level of the sport. And you hear about Conor McGregor potentially coming back. I know I say it in pretty much every MMA video, but he's 2 days in a row training, so I'm getting a little hyped there. But without that, none of it happens. So yes, selfishly as a fan, this is great. I want it to be great for the fighters as well. But yeah, it starts in January 2026, so you have about 5 months, a little less, give or take, to get through the ESPN era, but this is it. ESPN is gone. No more ESPN Plus sitting on a blank screen waiting for the commercial break to end, and hopefully no more buffering issues and all the issues that came with them working with ESPN. I think everybody is on the same page with thinking it was not the greatest viewing experience for fans at times, even just trying to buy the pay-per-view on the platform. It was rough. But you can say goodbye to that, and you can say goodbye to pay-per-view, because MMA just got a massive, massive upgrade for the fans, for the company, for the sport, and for the fighters. But again, we're going to see how that plays out payment-wise and everything else. But the exposure, the sport's growing. Boxing better take a look. I'm telling you now, if you're not looking at this and you're in the boxing scene, this is what's coming. Promoters, everybody else that's sitting here and doing deals with different people, this is what Turki Al-Sheikh and TKO are going to do. Make no mistake about it. That's not a prediction. It's a spoiler. There's a reason he brought these guys on board. This is that reason. And if TKO is able to get it done, being the newest kid on the block in boxing, I think that tells you all you need to know about the cesspool and the chaos and the just flat-footed, melodic, quite frankly, lazy era that boxing has been in. This feels like what the PBC wanted when they went to Amazon and didn't get, except the UFC got. And it's also telling that Paramount just did away with Bellator and did away with Showtime Boxing just recently over the last couple of years, and then immediately, once they signed their new merger deal, brought the UFC in. I think someone also said that the deal is worth more than Paramount itself as a company is right now. Obviously, with the merger, you invest to make more money back, and it drives their value up, but still, they just signed the UFC's TV rights deal for $7.7 billion. The entire company of Paramount, I think, is worth $6.6 billion. That shows you how willing they were to go in business with the UFC and how trusting they are that MMA is on the upside, is going to grow, and that this is going to be the way forward in the future. I agree with them, but you guys let me know down below. This is massive breaking news. What happens next for the UFC? What happens in their first big event on CBS? Who's going to be fighting there? How's this partnership going to go? Can they even top this? In 2016, I never would have thought they would sell for $4 billion. And then after that, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought they'd sell TV rights deals for $7.7 billion. But here we are. Nothing's off the table except pay-per-view, because it's dead and the UFC buried it. And I'm going to be honest, to my appreciation, and I think a lot of fans out there as well, what happens next with this whole thing, don't have those answers, but keep your eye on this, again, if you're a boxing fan, because I'm telling you, it's coming. But 2026 is when it starts. Like I said, $7.7 billion over 7 years. Those are the answers we have. There's a lot more that we don't, but starting January of next year, guess we'll find out.